everybody. You're probably wondering, what am I doing with this? Well, it's carnival time in Italy. And how do we know it's carnival time? Apart from the fact that carnival actually occurs in the 40 days leading up to Easter. So because Easter is a different day every year, even carnival, the date changes. But we know it's carnival. The first sign is when we start walking past bakeries. And what do we see? The windows are filled with loads and loads of fried, sugary, sweet treats. And that's how we know that carnival's arriving. So one of my favourite is what I'm going to cook for you now. They are called frittelle di riso. So I want you to imagine rice pudding that maybe you had as a child, rolled into balls and fried, and then rolled in sugar. Delicious. Ingredients, very simple, and actually you probably have most of this in the house already. The rice is something I will talk about though. The rice, in Italian it's called riso originario, and what it is, it's a very white starchy rice, but the grains are much smaller and they're rounded. So this rice is ideal for puddings, for sushi, but especially for desserts, and especially for the frittelle di riso that we're going to do now. If you can't find a riso originario, as it's called here in Italy, what you're looking for is a white, starchy, sticky rice. 200 grams of white, starchy, sticky rice, 100 grams of white sugar, 90 to 100 grams of plain flour, 2 eggs. We're going to use the zest of 1 lemon, 50 grams of butter, a pinch of salt, and the sultanas are optional, but what I'm going to do later on, I'm going to do half without and half with. These sultanas have already been soaked overnight in port, so that gives them yummy flavour, makes them plump, and will make our frittelle di riso even more delicious later on. Okay, so basically this recipe should be done over 2 days. So what we're going to do first, the first part is to cook the rice. We want to cook the rice, we want to let it cool down and sit in the fridge overnight, and then the next day we just have to add a few more ingredients and then start frying. I'm going to start by adding the rice, 400 ml of whole milk, and 400 ml of water. We're going to add a pinch of salt. Now with the lemon, please wash your lemons after you've bought them. I'm not actually going to grate the zest in. What I'm going to do is peel a little bit of the skin, and what we want to do is be careful not to get the white pithy part, because if you put the white pithy part in, that's going to make the rice really bitter. And trust me, I've done it before, so I speak from experience. Okay, so this will be in while the rice cooks, and then later on we'll remove it. So it just adds that hint of a flavour of lemon. Okay, so you need to watch this carefully. You need to watch it especially at the beginning. We're going to put the heat up high, we're going to bring it to the boil, and then we're going to lower it and it has to simmer. The last thing you want to do is burn your rice. So I can already smell the lemon. That smell of rice cooking in milk reminds me of when I was smaller and I would spend my weekends at my English grandmother's house, and she would often make us rice pudding for dessert. So this just fills me with nostalgia of my childhood. Okay, so we want it to cook like this. These are the bubbles that we want to see. Okay, so you can see that the rice is already starting to absorb all the liquid. It's becoming much thicker and denser. So I'd say it's about halfway through. And at this stage, I'm going to add the 100 grams of sugar. And I'm also going to add 50 grams of butter. You really need patience doing this part. But as I said earlier, once you've done this, this is the hardest part of the whole recipe. Once you've done this, the rest is easy. The word carnevale actually comes from Latin, carne levare, which means to remove meat. So it goes to say that we enjoy ourselves totally, and then we remove meat, we have Lent, and we have 40 days of behaving ourselves or fasting. Okay, so my rice is ready. I'm going to turn the heat off. And what we're going to do now, you could put it in a shallow baking dish, especially maybe if you're not going to wait overnight. I really recommend you do though. What we're going to do is put it in a bowl, a shallow baking dish, because that would actually cool quicker. But we're going to put it in a bowl. Now those lemon rinds that are in there, you can leave those in overnight and then just remove them the next day before frying them into the frittelle. Or you can take them out now. That's your personal choice. I like to leave them in because I just sort of think whatever lemon flavour can be infused, it's not going to do any harm. Okay, and what I like to do is it's still hot, I like to cover it in plastic wrap. So what that allows is the rice is going to sort of continue to cook a little longer. Now, allow that to come to room temperature and then you're going to put it in the fridge overnight. So obviously I have some rice that I cooked yesterday and I'll just get that out of the fridge. Okay, so this is the rice that I cooked yesterday. It's had a whole night in the fridge and you can see that it is very sticky, and quite hard. So, and that's how we want it to be. So what you're going to do, now you could do this in an electric mixer, but you can also do it by hand. So that's the way I'm going to do it today. You want to break up all the rice. It's going to be quite congealed, the butter's got cold. If you find a piece of that lemon, you want to remove that. Okay, so into this mixture we are going to add 2 eggs. And what I suggest is that you add the eggs one at a time. We're going to lightly beaten it, just very lightly. Break up that yolk before adding it in. We'll add another one. Now don't forget, it's always really important to open your eggs away from your cake mix or whatever it is you're mixing. We want to do that, number one, to avoid getting any shells into our mix. But also, if you've ever opened a bad egg, you know that, well, the smell is horrendous, but you don't want to ruin whatever you've prepared with a bad egg. So open it away from whatever you're baking or cooking and then add it separately from its own bowl into the mixture. Okay, once you're happy that the eggs have been mixed well into the rice mixture, we're going to add the flour. Keep mixing until all that flour is incorporated into the rice mixture. Okay, so when you buy frittelle di riso, you might find them just like this, made into a very rough ball or just any sort of shape and plunged into some hot oil. You might also find them with some, as I said earlier, the sultanas or even some candied peel. So about half we're going to put in here, maybe a bit more than half because I actually prefer them with the sultanas in them. And then what we'll do is add the sultanas to this. Actually weighed these. I've just grabbed a handful of sultanas, put them in some port, and as I said, it's just by eye, and I'm going to just add how many I want. I'm actually not going to add all of these because I think that's actually way too much. Okay, so we are ready now for the next step, which is the frying. Okay, so this is the fun part of this recipe. We have our rice ready. We have some sugar, some flour, and the oil. Now the oil has to be 180 degrees. If you do not have a thermometer, which I often don't, you can just test a little bit before and you can tell if it's getting, and you can tell if it's getting too hot because they'll brown actually too quickly. Now when I've actually already made one just to test it. So if you want them all to be pretty much the same size, use a measurer. Use a measuring spoon or a tablespoon, and that way you know that more or less you're putting the same amount of rice in each one. Now, I'll be honest, in Italy, when you go to the bakeries, they're not perfectly round. I think what they do is they just get a blob of rice and they throw it into the oil. But I like things to look pretty and organised, so we're going to try and make them all pretty much the same size. So, about a tablespoon, I'm going to drop that into the flour. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually not going to touch that sticky part. I'm going to use my hand to go underneath it, make sure it's covered in the flour. And only when it's covered in the flour do I pick it up and we make a rough little ball. Now note, some recipes don't put the rice into the flour before frying it. Some of them will fry directly from here, but the flour really helps. It's not sticking to my hands. It really helps for you to make an actual little ball. So So what I normally do is make about 5 or 6 at the one time and fry them in batches. So to start with, we'll do 3 plain ones and we'll do 3 with the rice with the sultanas. Okay, so when we're going to drop them in the oil, you want to be careful not to throw them in because you don't want them to splash hot oil on you, obviously. So you can either add them with the use or just roll them gently into the oil. Be very careful that they don't stick on the bottom. You want to move them around as they're in the oil so that number 1, obviously they're not sticking to each other, and number 2, they're not sticking to the bottom. We want them to be lovely and golden brown. Okay, so you can see slowly moving them around in the oil, making sure that you're covering all sides. They're slowly getting golden brown. Okay, when you're happy with the colour it's reached, you're going to take it out, you're going to drain it well, and you're going to put it on kitchen paper to absorb any excess oil. The ones with the sultanas have actually cooked quicker or first, so we're going to then pick them up, we're going to drop them in sugar. Now you do need to do this while they're hot to make sure that the sugar's going to stick on them. And we'll continue until we've finished up all our rice.